love, love, I want your love. Hey everybody, we are back in my library for a little just discussion video that I had in mind. I didn't write any notes, we're just gonna chat, we're just gonna talk, we're gonna vibe. I'm gonna share my opinion, you can share your opinion in the comments below. The thought process for all of this started a while ago. Some of you may be aware that I have been working on the side on a little writing project that's just for me. It's the most Julian thing that you will ever read in your life. And also because I am a ham, I wanted to give other people the chance to read it. Because, okay, I'll be honest, when I'm really enjoying writing something, I want people to read it so that we can enjoy it together. And I always hope that maybe there'll just be at least one person who's as excited about this as I am. All I really need is one person. That project is called Adventurer Mage, if you want to check it out. I'm still working on it, still putting it out once a week, so. But when I was starting it out, I was just thinking about when I get started, I kind of, as I'm writing the first few chapters, think about where is this story going, especially with a story like this where I did not have any kind of plan. I just knew these two characters, who they were going to be important, and then I was just going to kind of let them adventure. And I got to thinking okay, well, it's a male and a female character, and the story is incredibly laser focused on them. If you end up not liking their characters, you're probably not going to like the story because it is about them. And at first I was oh, well, they're going to have a romance eventually. And then I remembered this thing is quintessentially Julian, and therefore it doesn't need a romance. I don't have to put one if I don't want to. So freeing. So freeing. And I was no, this is definitely the story of platonic soulmates. This is two desperately lonely people who need each other and need to become friends, and that friendship can be intense and beautiful and every bit as meaningful as a romance without them ever having to smooch or have sex or anything like that. But all of that is to say, it got me thinking about romance in stories because I was I'm loving this, I want to share it with the world. Maybe when I finish, I should try to polish it up and publish it. But I was I'm gonna have to self-publish it because as soon as an agent realizes there's no romance, they're not gonna want it. I feel it's that easy to not get an agent. They're just gonna be oh, there's no romance in it? Pass. And I have seen many people, on Twitter and such, mentioning that they will not read a book unless there's a romance in it. And then I got to thinking about a few times where I have heard a book doesn't have a romance and I have been less interested in it. And I was why, Julian? You don't need a romance in a book. You would gladly write books that didn't have romances in them way more often if it wasn't so popular. Why do you need a romance in a book? And thinking about it, my theory is, and you can feel free to share your theories below, because this is just my theory. When I realize a book doesn't have a romance, I worry that that means there will not be deep character interactions and deep friendships, because I realize that romance in books a lot of times is kind of used to substitute for any other kind of deep relationship. And I theorize that many people who do come to rely on reading romances in their various books is because they know they will not get any kind of meaningful, intense relationship and character interactions unless there's a romance. Because oftentimes, in many stories, the romantic couple are the only ones who really get meaty, interesting, intense relationship development. When you can have that with friends, haven't all of us had some really wonderful, meaningful interactions with our friends? We share deep, meaningful things with our friends all the time, or at least I hope you're able to, I'm able to. And those are really wonderful and beautiful and intense relationships. And there's no smooching. So that's my theory, and that's how I came to it. And then I was kind of curious, I'm going to put a poll up in a few places to see what other people think. Do the people who follow me, do they require romance in their story to enjoy it? I put the question up on my community tab on YouTube and on Twitter. I wasn't doing some sort of in-depth scientific thing. I just wanted to see what my followers were saying. The question I asked is, you find out the book you're looking forward to has no romance in it, but it sounds awesome otherwise. Are you still going to read it? And 95% of people said that yes, they would still read it without the romance, with only 5% of 66 votes saying that no, they would not read it without the romance, which honestly surprised me. I thought more people would say no, it needs to have a romance, because that was the vibe that I definitely get on like Twitter and such. Like romance, 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 we need the romance. Now, I will grant you, it was not very scientific of me to only ask about a book that you were already looking forward to. If there turned out to be no romance, would you still read it? Instead of just in general saying, if a book has no romance, just any book, would you still read it? So I do understand that this was not the most scientific of surveys. I felt like I wanted to know, because most people, at least that I know, don't go into books completely blind. Like they have some kind of thought towards their enjoyment, so I guess I wanted to know more whether it would stop you from reading a book that you were already looking forward to. But obviously there's a bit of a gap, because in this opinion poll, again, opinion, not scientific, I didn't ask about just like books in general, if you will avoid a book if you know it doesn't have a romance. But feel free to answer that in the comments below. Let's look at some of the comments and see what people are saying. And Sophie says, I think the market is oversaturated with romance. I agree. So I would actually be looking forward to a non-romance book. I agree, especially if I knew the author and I trusted the author to do the other character relationships in the books justice. Even without a romance, I am still a very, very character-focused writer and character-focused reader. So if I'm not getting interesting character interactions and relationships, then I'm going to put the book down either way, romance or no. Several people kind of mentioned that if the plot is interesting enough, then that will substitute in for the romance. But again, for me, it's like, no, I also got to have other characters having good, strong friendships or familial relationships, or I mean, everybody loves found family, right? Rebecca says, absolutely. While I love a good romance and fantasy and sci-fi, I don't need it. As long as the plot stands on its own, I'll be reading it. So again, looking for a stronger plot. Tegan, I think that's how to pronounce your name, says, I love a good romantic subplot, but if a book doesn't have one, that doesn't bother me, as long as there is enough character development and general intrigue. I think romance is something a lot of authors don't get quite right. So I've definitely been left disappointed with a lot of romance in novels. Not only are we going, we gotta have romance in our book, but also we're trying to find a good one. It's a bit of a crapshoot, really. Author Cassie Bibe, I don't actually know how to pronounce it, says, I always prefer romance, but I've read plenty of books that don't have romance in them. I appreciate you being honest and saying that you do prefer a romance, because, like, we're not here to shade anybody who says that they do prefer a romance. I'm just interested in why. They say fantasy, sci-fi, dystopian, etc. are a no-go for me if there's no romance, because I don't really care for those genres much in general. So, romance can definitely be used as something to bridge you over if you're not as into a genre, but you are into romance. You could use that to come over into that genre and enjoy it. I wish there was a better way to say that a story has strong friendships in it. I mean, there's found family and there's bromance, but there's so many like variables involved in that, versus romance, you pretty much know what you're gonna get. But if they're like, the bromance is great, then you're like, well, okay, it's great, but how much is there? Because I was promised a lot of bromance in the book The Lies of Locke Lamora, and then I was sorely disappointed that it was there, and I liked it when I got to see it, but it was, those two characters like barely interacted until the end. Sassy Blonde Writer says, I like bromances and womances, which I assume is the female version, or when the real love was their hobby or career all along. You will enjoy Adventurer Mage if that is something that you are into. We're going to look at Twitter real quick just to see if anybody has anything to add there. As usual, Twitter got far fewer votes because I am hugely unpopular on Twitter. It got 13 votes though, which is more than I usually get, to be honest with you. And 100% of people said yes, they would read the book even if they knew that it wasn't going to have romance in it. Now, of course, I did put the caveat that saying it is a book you're already looking forward to. Afra Ash says, romance subplots are unnecessary, and I really dislike the way they're forced into everything. It's one thing if it's the primary focus, but if it's a fantasy epic or a thriller or whatever else, then it just distracts and adds to the page count. And yeah, sometimes romances do feel really, really shoehorned in, because that's like, it's almost like a checkbox that authors feel like they need to tick off. Like, oh yeah, better have a romance in there too. And Rovenia, I think that's how I pronounce your name, I don't know, says, I avoid romance wherever I can, as it's none of my damn business what the character feels about stuff unnecessary to the fantasy or sci-fi related problem. Which is interesting because it's kind of counter to what Cassie said in a previous comment, mentioning that if it is a sci-fi or fantasy, she wants a romance. And this person is saying if it's a sci-fi or fantasy, I don't want a romance because I want to focus on the sci-fi and fantasy. So that's really interesting. I don't really have an answer for that. It's just like an interesting dichotomy there. But I think it does come down to what you enjoy reading. Like Cassie's not really into sci-fi and fantasy, so they would need a romance to guide them into it, versus this other reader seems to probably be a lot more into sci-fi and fantasy, so it wouldn't matter if there was a romance in it. So anyway, this was mostly just an excuse to talk about my new Wattpad story that you should 100% go read, because I'm really enjoying it and I really want at least one other person to be as excited about it as I am. And that person could be you! But also, please share down below what you think of romance in stories. You can be honest, I'm not going to be hard on you. If you're like, I only read stories with romance, I'm sorry, I don't like stories that don't have romance. That's okay, that's just your taste. I was honestly surprised by how many people said that they didn't need a romance, because I was kind of under the impression that if you write something without a romance, no one will read it. So hey, that gives me a little hope that maybe someday I will polish up and publish Adventure a Mage. I mean, there's also not a romance in my most popular book on Wattpad, which is Second Floor. People fucking love Second Floor, so I guess I could also just look at that as an example. Although I legitimately have no idea why everyone loves Second Floor so much. I go back and read like sections and I'm like, ugh, who wrote this? Oh, it was me. Shit. Someday maybe I'll fix up Second Floor as well, but people seem to be enjoying it. And I really hope that people will enjoy Adventure a Mage as well, so go check it out if you are interested. There's platonic soulmates in it, you guys. Platonic soulmates. My heart, okay? I love them so much. They are my children. Thank you so much for watching this video. As you guys know, I post a lot of videos here on this channel, so go wander around, check it all out if you can stand the sound of my voice for any longer than this. I also have a Patreon where your support goes to helping me publish my own books like The Wolf and the Hawk, which actually is a romance, because I know what's popular. So if you like a little kissing and a little killing, check out The Wolf and the Hawk, available now on Amazon in all forms. If you want to be around to answer some polls every now and then, definitely become my friend over on Twitter. Keep an eye here on my channel, because you never know when I'm going to come up with an idea to ask people something. All the links to my social media are in the doobly-doo for ease of your clicking. And I will see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye! Stop. Patron time. Alright, I'll just read you the patrons. Rainfall, Kit, Hidden Glade, Persephone, Light Julie, OS, Anna C, Anna W, Belle, Patrick Murphy, Anne Sophie, Lennox, Callison, Ray, Artemis, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Irene, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, Lisa, and Sarah. Those are sure some pretty awesome patrons. I bet you're jealous, but they're mine. You can't have them.
I know it's a difficult mission, but you and I have to get it on.
I understand. We have no choice. Take me, sir. Take me hard.